I want to quickly look at a couple of metrics on your screen at the moment. The Russell 2000 is down nearly 2%. The Dow transports are getting hammered, down 269 points, or 2.5%. And when you think about the dichotomy between those two, small and mid caps don't do a lot of international trade. But the transports, and we're talking about railroads and airlines, they are very price sensitive to any time the word China trade and let's say a few arrows flying through the air at the Chinese are materializing. So Larry Kudlow couldn't have been clearer earlier today when just a few hours ago he called the Chinese, quote, illegal traders and uncooperative in the trade talks. But that was just the latest in a slew of disparate headlines, everything from, as we mentioned, the Chinese currency. While the U.S. did not label China as a currency manipulator, it said, we're watching you. We're adding it to the watch list. It's already there, I think. And that they plan to pull out of a 144-year-old postal treaty. Donald Trump says it lets China ship packages at ridiculously low prices, and he is still threatening higher tariffs in January on China. But are all of these jabs part of a grand and bigger plan and strategy to keep the U.S. a heavyweight in the ring when President Trump meets China's President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit next month? I and Fox Business will be there covering this event. Michael Pillsbury helped define our nation's economic and military relationship with China by working with various administrations, including the current one. The markets were already down. Let's be very honest about that. But when Larry Kudlow, the chief economic mouthpiece for the government, came through and said to the Detroit group that he was speaking with, the Chinese are uncooperative, boy, did we drop. I think we dropped to session lows of about 470 points to the downside. What did he mean by that?
What did Larry Kudlow mean? I think he misunderstands the president's true views and the president's strategy. Larry Kudlow should correct his statement, in my view. President Trump's been very clear. He wants a deal with China. They have been uncooperative in the sense that up until now, but they're certainly going to come around given all this pressure. And frankly, I can tell you, Liz, you can buy, and if you go into a bookstore in Beijing, you'll see a large pile of books for sale by Donald J. Trump, The Art of the Deal. The Chinese leadership is quite wary of President Trump. They think he's got a strategy, and they don't want to be played for fools. So, of course, they're being tough for the time being. I think there's no doubt there's going to be a deal, probably heading off the 25% tariffs on all of their exports to America. They certainly want to avoid that. They don't want to confess to their wrongdoing. They don't want to admit all the technology theft. But they're in the mood for a deal, and we've probably seen in the past month as many as 10 Chinese delegations come to Washington, sniffing around, if you will, looking for the bottom line, what should be our first offer. But they respect President Trump. They're almost afraid of him. And they don't want to make a mistake by making an offer that's too high and then have them, be pressured even more.
Michael,
so I don't think Larry meant to drive the stock market down 400 points, but he's leaving out the part of it that President Trump really is a deal maker. And this is probably going to be the outcome. It's not going to be World War III or an endless tariff war. No.
Do you expect a breakthrough at the G20 meeting? Word is both leaders will be there. They're still deciding whether to meet. It's almost like they're circling each other in the ring. But again, all these little jabs, who's on their back heels? It seems to me like Xi Jinping is the one who's at a slight disadvantage here and needs to come to the table.
No, I wouldn't necessarily assume that. Xi Jinping doesn't have a Senate and a House and a lot of critics the way President Trump does. You saw Mitch McConnell in the morning news. Mitch McConnell is undercutting the president by saying he hopes we don't have tariffs go any higher. And
well,
specifically,
he's hurting, though, Michael. His state is starting to hurt because of the tariffs. He's got to stick up for his constituents.
Well, but not undercutting the president in delicate negotiations with China. He could give his views that he hopes Kentucky bourbon, will not be the topic of tariffs. But the too much undercutting of President Trump, and it makes the strategy that he's following even more difficult to implement.
Yeah, I get that. I definitely understand that. But China tomorrow, or at least overnight, I guess it would be. It's our tomorrow, but overnight, they will come out with their third quarter GDP. I'm not sure I trust any numbers the Chinese put out because they've got a dynasty. They don't have a democracy. But will we start to get a clearer picture of how much the trade war is hurting them? Because it appears to, I've talked to some Chinese nationals here who say the Chinese are nervous.
I think that's right. They are nervous. I expect an offer from them to come in time to be discussed before the Buenos Aires summit. The Chinese know very well they can't just spring something on President Trump right there in Buenos Aires. So there needs to be some development of the two sides' shape of what they want to have the deal be. But frankly, Liz, even an agreement in principle from Xi and President Trump coming out of Buenos Aires would be quite wonderful, part of what the president's strategy has been seeking all along. Then there could be follow-on agreements with more detail. Bob Lighthizer is just a master at getting the details locked in. But some sort of agreement in principle at Buenos Aires could be very possible.
Well, I and Fox Business will be there. We'll be doing our show live. Michael, I hope to see you there because it's possibly going to be the most exciting G20 in decades.
I hope the president tells you first.
Yeah, you know what? I'm pushing for that. Thank you so much. Tell him.
Thanks,
Talk to Liz.
Thank you.
Michael Pillsbury, it's great to have you. Thank you so much.